Welcome to the Vulnerable Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Almeida. Each week, we'll share the inspiring story of someone who has faced their share of vulnerability and been able to find success and fulfillment. We hope all our stories will help you find the strength within yourself to live the life you want and find success of your own. Harriet Lerner said, "Control is an illusion, a fact you will learn very fast if you become ill or have things fall apart in some other way. When we understand vulnerability and suffering is an essential part of being human, our individual fate can be easier to manage." This is episode 22 of the Vulnerable Podcast with Lila Smith. When she was a kid, she had opinions about everything. She would learn new board games and immediately come up with better rules. By better, she thought more fun. But friends who wanted to play the way they knew how would sometimes get upset. This began a path of her realizing that the way we communicate makes a big difference, and that better is only better if it makes everyone feel good. To this day, she's still learning and growing, and even considers herself a big kid. Her career in theater has taught her so much about cooperation and letting go of control. Starting her own business a couple of years ago would be one of the scariest moments in her life. Then, shortly after, she'd take another big risk in uprooting her life from New York to Dallas, continuing to push her own limits. Now she's training people to say things better, which is the name of her company, helping individuals and companies harness the power of intentional communication. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to get vulnerable with Lila Smith. Hey, Lila, thank you for coming on the Vulnerable Podcast. I'm excited to have you on today. We've known each other for a couple of years now through LinkedIn, and I'm glad that you've decided to come on and share your story.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You were one of my earliest connections of a person who I hadn't worked with before.
Oh, yeah?
And I think I probably came to you through the LinkedIn local movement,
I'm going
which
to
is
assume
when
so.
a lot of things started to change for a lot of us, right?
Yeah. No, I'm going to assume that's probably right, because it's probably I met a good majority of my contacts last year. So if we look back far enough, I'm sure we'd find out.
Yeah.
So the first question I like to ask all of my guests is, what is your definition of vulnerability?
So vulnerability and my definitions, I kind of have my own language that I speak with Say Things Better, a method that I created based on some stuff I learned when I was in theater. And it's 5 steps. And these steps include the 5th step, which is verb your values. So I like to think about verbs. Because they take words and imply action. And to me, action is the truth, the proof, it's where it's at. So definitions of vulnerability, you could think about being honest with yourself, being honest with other people, being open about things that otherwise carry shameful emotions. There are a lot of ways to think about it. But when I think about how I would define vulnerability, it's really through action. So what are you sharing with others that requires you to trust them to be a safe space for you? And that verb to me would be to entrust. So if I decide to entrust you, then there's a definition that's implied that trust is required for me to expose something or to rely on you. So it's that needing of trust, to need to trust somebody else, to entrust. It's also the fastest way to build trust.
That's a different one, completely different. I've heard a lot of similar definitions. Nothing's been exactly the same, which is exactly what I'm hoping for, obviously, because I want to get different definitions. But that one is by far the most different that I've heard so far, but a great way of looking at it, without a doubt. So what would you say is your earliest memory of facing some sort of struggle or vulnerability in your life?
When I was a kid, I needed a lot of attention. I say that like that's over, right? I still need a lot of attention. But I had this idea in my head that the world revolved around me and I created the rules, which I, still feel that I can create rules of my own. But as a little kid, I remember that I used to make up my own rules to Candyland. And I decided I would be Queen Frostine, which wasn't a thing. That's not how you play the game. There's little plastic gingerbread characters, and you move them around colorful spots and collect things. But I decided I would be Queen Frostine. And anybody else who played with me, they could pick whatever character they wanted. And if they wanted to be Queen Frostine, they could be Queen Frostine too. And I thought this was great because everybody would have an equal opportunity to be whoever they wanted in this imagination world of Candyland. And then I remember that I was playing it with a friend, and I was very young. I can't believe that I even remember this, but I must have been like 4 or 5 or something. And I was playing it with a friend and trying to explain the rules. And she didn't understand. Like, she didn't get that you could be a character. She understood the rules as they were written. She understood the rules as she played it at her house. And she got very upset, very angry that I didn't want to play the game the right way. And she said that I was cheating. And I was like, this is not like, how can you think that I'm cheating? I felt so hurt, that like I made these rules so that there wouldn't be anything to win or lose, that we could just have a good time. And I remember feeling like just very hurt that someone didn't see things my way. And that was a very early exposure to, the different ways that we communicate, who our communication partners are, the people who are going to get us and the people who aren't. That was pretty early.
So, and I'm assuming this wasn't like the only case of this happening. I'm assuming this is something, because if you're bringing it up as something that you faced and you even say you still face to this day, I'm assuming this is something that sort of presented itself in other ways as you were growing up.
Oh yeah. I mean, and I'm still growing up, and I'm still learning that there are some things that we take for granted because they're natural to us or they're part of our cultural context. And when we come across other people who have a different context, we have to take responsibility for adapting, adjusting, learning and listening to how people are taking what we're communicating. And that impact, the result that we want to achieve, is important, but achieving it in a way that feels good to the other people around us is more important. And so I've learned, even though I feel like I have a great method, I feel like I have a great set of rules for how I live my life, that they're not the only ones. And I have to think about, one, like who I want to have really close to me, if that's going to be the case. Who can I be relaxed around in living by my rules? And two, when I want to communicate with people who are outside of that immediate circle, what can I include? What do I have that will relate to those people so that we can authentically connect? Where do we agree? And then find a set of rules that works for us both in that area.
Interesting. So, I mean, I think you sort of answered the question I was going to ask next, but just to maybe get a clear idea. So how would you say that you started to overcome, is it through these things that you've learned? Is it through some other program, or, I mean, maybe it's through theater, like you spoke about earlier. Like, how did you overcome this need to, I guess, basically make all the rules and be in charge? And like you said, you're still dealing with it now, but I'm assuming you've overcome it somewhat. Otherwise,
I've come a long way for sure. I can tell you what some of the lessons are that I'm continuing to try to learn. Just because we learn a lesson doesn't mean that we have like perfected it or internalized it and made it part of our rote life. But theater taught me almost everything about what I need to know. That book or whatever it is, Everything I Need to Know, I learned in kindergarten.
Never heard of it, but
Never heard of it? Well, I think it's some good lessons about sharing and stuff like that. But I think everything I need to know, I learned in theater. I learned how to listen and really truly be present. I learned about the magic of that curiosity in the moment. God, I don't know what's going to happen next. Even though I know what the lines will be in the script, that stuff doesn't change. But I don't know how the person across from me is going to respond. And so being very, very open to that. There's Meisner technique, and I've learned to use my imagination through the Stella Adler technique. And there are all of these different trainings that I've had within the sphere of what people call method acting, starting from the Stanislavski system of acting, which was a method that he gave to from Moscow Art Theater, bringing it to the United States and giving it to actors here so that we would have a method to use in rehearsals so that we could make sure that we're being realistic and connective and present and making discoveries that are exciting and serve the story and serve our moment to moment connection. I also learned not to be a diva. Nobody likes to work with that person. And no matter how talented you are, if you get the diva reputation, unless you are one of maybe 5 actresses in the world, you're not going to be getting those stage roles if that's what you're like to work with. People will always choose to work with people who are collaborative over people who are kind of overly commanding and demanding. I'm sure you've experienced that, different personality types, right? Like people that you don't want to work with again, even if they're smart.
No, for sure. I mean, I've been in sales for most of my life, and I think from doing that, it's allowed me to get a pretty good read on people overall. Just because in sales, you sort of have to catch the vibe of the other person as quickly as possible, so you know how to interact with them, because you're trying
That's
to sell
it.
them something
Yeah,
at the end of the day. So I understand where you're coming from there for sure. And
that's exactly it.
what's interesting to me there is sort of, it sounded to me, and I don't want to overuse the word being the name of my podcast, but it seemed to me that sort of vulnerability helped you overcome that situation of feeling like you always need to be in control. Because from what you
Yeah,
just said there, through all those different teachings that you were learning, it sort of made you sort of have to leave control, like lose, not,
yeah.
I want to say lose control, but maybe that's the right way to
Oh,
put it, but
yeah,
you
absolutely.
had
You
to
have to
just sort of,
completely give up control to the moment. You can do everything that you can do. You can control how much you prepare. You can control how much research you do. You can control whether you have researched a character by looking through all of their lines in the script and seeing what other characters have had to say about that person. And you can do all of the prep work about the dramaturgical world of the play. So, what time period it's set in, what was happening at the time, what kind of sociological issues there were. You can come to rehearsal with your lines memorized. All of that is stuff you can control. But once you're in the moment, you have your intentions set, you know what you're going into that scene to do to achieve for that character, their objective. And you go into a scene knowing that that's what you want to do. And then you have to acknowledge that you are just there representing this one character, and there are other characters on stage who are going to be standing in your way, who are written there on purpose to create dramatic conflict, to say whatever your character's objective is, she can't have it. And you have to give up control. You have to give up control while all the while relentlessly pursuing what that character wants. But what it taught me off stage is when we don't have a script and we don't have somebody who's put in our way to be an adversary, that we can help those other people on stage in our own lives too. We can help other people to achieve their objectives. And then we get a partnership rather than an adversary.
hmm. That's interesting how you're able to take things that you learned in sort of your professional life into your personal life. Because I think usually we're trying to do the opposite. We're trying to bring stuff from our
Right.
personal life into our professional life, but you're sort of is the other way around, which is
Well, it's
interesting.
it's both.
Yeah.
As an actor, like we have this story to tell, and when we're showing up on stage, what you're seeing is thoughts running through my own personal life, things that I have experienced, imagining with the person opposite me in the scene, that it's not like, let's say you're the other actor. I'm not seeing Brian Almeida if I'm, putting someone in who has sort of a paternal conflict role. I would pick maybe an old boss of mine who was very confrontational and male, and like had this energy that made me very uncomfortable. So like that would be the person that I would substitute in my head for that character on stage, even if you are playing him. And that's especially helpful because we love the other actors in the scene. How can we get mad at them if we don't transfer that experience to somebody that we can get mad at or that we can feel uncomfortable around? So I'm taking my whole personal history, and to me, it's present. Even though these other words that a playwright wrote are what I'm speaking, the reality to me is my own personal life story plus imagination. Plus, what if that guy were here right now and the circumstances were something that we had never been through together? So I use all of the different methods in order to accomplish that when I'm on stage, which has been a while. Um, yeah, but you learn that you are not the only character with an objective in a room. And what it teaches us is that even people that we see as villains, because I've played villains before, and I've played people who really are horrible people, and I've played people who have been killed by other people. I used to play, there was this 2-year period of time when I kept getting cast as the girl who died for various reasons, which was just like this running joke. But it was really eye-opening that people that we vilify, people we see as the other, the opposite, the antagonist, all of those people have also come on stage into this scene, or what I now call in real life a communication event. And they are pursuing something that they feel will be positive for them and the impact that they want to make. Nobody sets out to say, I want to hurt that person just so that I can hurt them, unless there's some kind of psychopath.
Yeah.
Most people are saying, if I hurt that person, this positive effect will be achieved.
Interesting. Definitely never thought of things that way, but and especially with the world of trolls and everything nowadays, you
Yeah,
tend to look at it on the
it's a
opposite.
perfect example.
Yeah.
So
So
think about it. Like, have you had a troll like in the last year that you particularly remember,
me personally, yes,
or
but
that
it
you've seen?
never. Yeah, no, me personally, I did have one, but the interaction was quick and over.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, I can definitely like I definitely remember it, and my initial reaction was not that. My initial reaction was I want to get back at this person. My initial reaction
yeah,
was I have this great online community. If I put this out there, it's going to blow up in this person's face. And then I
yeah,
realized, you know what? Then I'm just stooping to their level, and it really doesn't make sense. So I sort of just I ended up putting out a post, but it was just sort of a very generic, like, that one bad apple can spoil the bunch. And so that was what it was for me, is like, this is one bad apple and a bunch of good ones. So rather than letting him spoil the whole thing, let's just focus on all the good that's out there and forget about that situation.
yeah. It's a nice message
Yeah.
to share that kind of positivity. It still gave a lot of attention to what the situation was,
Yeah.
but it's a very nice message, and that makes total sense to me coming from you, that you would want to focus on the positive community building and how many positive, happy, wonderful, supportive people did show up for you the way that you've shown up for all of us.
No,
I've
I
had that
appreciate
before.
that.
I've had those trolls on the post. When you think about those people who say negative things, or they put you down, or they're just there to try to poke holes in something or prove something, what do you think that they get out of that? What's the positive for them?
To be honest with you, I don't know what it would have been for this person, because like it wasn't even through like a post or a comment. It was in the behind the scenes, like in messages. And it was just weird, because I basically just responded to this person's message saying, basically they asked me to come to their event with one of my colleagues from the company that I had got let go from. And at that point, I had been telling my story on LinkedIn saying, I got let go from my job and so on and so
Mm-hmm.
forth. So to me, it was like this sort of salesy message to somebody. And yet, I had been talking about the fact that I didn't work at that company. And it wasn't even in my LinkedIn as a resume, if you want to call it, it didn't show that I was currently employed there. So it was really weird to me. So I just sort of responded saying like, hey, like, I don't work there anymore. It seems odd to me that, if we've been interacting over this past little while, that you didn't notice that, my content sort of alludes to that. And then it just came back as like, well, like maybe this is the reason you got fired and blah, blah. It was just really weird. It got really confrontational really quick for no reason, because all I was trying to say is, hey, like, if you're going to reach out and have this kind of message, maybe look into the person's backstory a bit rather than just,
Absolutely. Right. Like, I'm listening to you, and I'm assuming that person had not seen your content.
maybe, yeah.
Benefit of the doubt, they're not
Yeah.
being malicious. They're just trying to send one kind of blanket message, or go through a list of leads that maybe they had
Hmm.
created, or an intern had created for them a year ago when it would have been relevant, and they're
Yeah.
just getting around to it.
Yeah.
So just benefit of the doubt, like
Yeah.
maybe that was the
Hindsight's
case.
2020, right?
Yeah. I mean, if that, right?
Yeah.
We never really know. But if I have the attitude of, let me just assume that people have good intentions, and if that's the case. But when I talk about the say things better method of intentional communication, step 4 is your toolbox. Those are things that you have at your disposal in order to make a connection between you and your communication partner's objective before you ask for anything. So if they're reaching out to you with an ask, then first of all, they should know what makes that a win for you. And how can they know that if they've done no research? And one of the easiest things that you can do on LinkedIn is do some research about what somebody needs in order to feel like they're successful. Look at their activity,
Hmm.
look at their posts, look at the things that they're saying. This is real time communication. It is like a fly on the wall view. It doesn't get better than that. It's laid out there for you. And I'm going to do a post about this soon about how to sell to me because I feel like, I mean, I could buy services, you know, or products or whatever. And the people who reach out to me, they do that kind of thing so often where they've done no research. And I'm like, why would someone like me, who's all about true connection, I know everything that everybody does, who has made sure that I know what it is, why would I go with somebody who I have never interacted with before, who's made no effort to get to know me when I've been vulnerable? I've shared stuff about myself and about my business every single day since June 1st, 2017. Every day. Like there's no excuse. But I mean, those kind of, when you talk about being in the DMs, right, or direct messages, the reason somebody gets confrontational there is a power struggle. It's an ego thing, you know? So if they feel that they are looking bad or they're losing in some way, uh, one of the reasons that people lash out is because if they feel they have struck a ceiling and they can't rise any higher in success than where they are right now in this conversation, then the only thing they can do to regain the power is try to push down the other person so that they're below them. So
Hmm.
whether it's public or private, those are usually people's positive motivations to win or to feel confident. Their objectives might be to be the expert in the room.
No, speaking of that now, and like looking back at the situation, this person, just in the way they present themselves through their content and stuff. I mean, I don't follow them anymore, obviously, but
Mhm.
in the
Yeah.
time that I did, I can see ego there for sure,
Oh,
without a
for
doubt,
sure.
because this
Yeah.
person was very like, loud in their personality online, and so I can definitely see where that might have come into play. And like I said, when I said hindsight there, what I was sort of alluding to is, after it happened, I was having a conversation with a friend even the next day, and he sort of mentioned a lot of the same things you did. Like maybe it's just an auto message, maybe it's the person's assistant that's messaging you, not them. All these different things,
Yeah.
and he's like, you kind of reacted a little bit too quickly, I guess. And like I said, in hindsight, sure, maybe I did, but it was just very weird how it went from like one thing to the next, and then like I said, the whole thing just sort of blew up, and I was like surprised. But I mean, like you
Yeah.
said, I think the other thing too is that when it's in those private messages, there's maybe a certain amount of confidence we have compared to outside of that. And there was other times, in the time that I've been on LinkedIn where, it wasn't maybe necessarily me, but somebody else, that, got sort of trolled or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And you just sort of, sometimes I'd see people interact with it a lot more, and then it would just end up where that person would like delete all their comments and like run
Yeah.
away and be like, oh no. But other times where it maybe got a little out of hand. So yeah, I think trying to find like you said, the positive, or look at where that person might be coming from, would probably be a better way of dealing with it than just sort of getting yourself more involved with it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the, or you can get involved in it, but do it intentionally and know why you're doing it. You know, I see when you go on other people's like troll comments and come to their defense, it's because you want people to know what you stand for.
Hmm.
And you want your friends, your close connections to know that you have their back. They're your communication partner. When you say to somebody else, your behavior is not acceptable, it doesn't even matter how they take it. It matters that your friend whose post they commented on knows that you have their back. They're your communication partner.
Hmm. Interesting. So the one thing I was sort of curious about is so you talked about like how you, when you were younger, it was this sort of need for control, and then how you overcame that through certain acting classes and things that you did, and certain techniques that you learned, what new strength overall would you say you discovered after going through all that in yourself?
You mean since then?
Well, like, yeah, I guess, I mean, again, not maybe at this point in your life, but at that, before you get to where you're at now, like, what new strength would you say you presented in yourself? Like, maybe it was confidence, maybe it was something else. Like, as you were going through these courses and learning these techniques and things to help you overcome that feeling or that need of control, what new strength did you discover in yourself from going through that?
The ability to make other people feel seen, included, considered, important. Other people are important to me so much. You can actually see it if you look at my Clifton Strengths breakdown. I have a full 34. I just posted on Instagram at Lila Lasagna. You can check out. But it shows how the people things, whether I'm influencing others to be the best, most impactful versions of themselves, or showing them what things about them are so special that they can actually make money from them if they talk about them, included in their messaging, and create products around it. Or if it's just that I have these relating themed strengths where I can listen to somebody and connect. That ability to connect, I think above all really defines me. I can walk into a room and it'll be full of strangers for about 1 second and then I know everybody and I know what they do and I know how I can help them and I know what's special about them and I celebrate. I celebrate every person that I find something in to love. I think that's probably my favorite thing about myself is recognizing and celebrating other people's specialness.
Huh. Well, that's a powerful strength there. I mean,
Yeah.
I would like to think that I'm trying to do the same, but I don't think I'm at the same level. I definitely discovered a couple of years ago, literally probably maybe months before I lost my last sales job, in a conversation that I had with a friend, that if I had everything in the world, the money and all that kind of stuff, and everything was just the way that, I was comfortable in every other way, the only thing I'd want to do moving forward is help others, because I think that that's where, and I hear it all the time through other podcasts, through whatever, maybe books that I'm reading or other people that I've interviewed, is that, when you're in service of others is when you feel the best. And that's what I'm trying to do, even with this
Yeah.
podcast, is trying to help people learn that, yeah, you can go through struggles, you can go through vulnerable moments in your life, but there is a way out. And each person, each that I interview, I'm hoping will show a different technique or a different way or whatever it is, through their story, that can, somebody else listening can relate with and go, huh, maybe I can do this, or maybe I can try that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely a good strength to have, 100%. So
You have a really good memory. And I think especially where people are concerned, people's stories, this post I saw this time, this thing that happened, this thing that those people are good at. You remember interactions and how they felt, and you also remember details. Do you know that about yourself? Because I've observed this in you. Does that sound like you?
so it's really weird that you say that, because
Yeah.
yesterday when I was at so I have a job outside that, I do 40 hours a week. I work at a factory doing manual labor, and because the job's very redundant, I tend to get a lot more time to think. Anyways, getting to the point now, yesterday the thought came to my mind that when I'm doing my show notes for each episode, I'm not actually listening to the episode again to do them. I'm actually able to pull from what I remember from that
Yeah.
episode to type out the show notes, which is really weird to me, because uh, you know, I've done, like I said to you, I think before we hopped on here, you're like episode 18 or 19. And for me to be able to go back to that single interview and pull enough, quick points, I don't need a lot, but enough
Hmm.
to write those show notes. I was thinking about that exact same thing last night. Like, what is it about my memory that allows me to do that? So it's funny that you bring that
I would
up.
love to know. I mean, look, it's something that I've observed about you. And, when I think about like our superpowers or the things that are really special about us, and one of mine is connection, but I feel like mine is very energetic regarding connection, but yours is mind blowing to me, to see what you're able to hold in your head and pull out. You have these references when you comment, like, oh yeah, that reminds me of this thing, and tagging in that person. Or I remember that I think you once said something on one of my posts about something I had posted a year prior. Oh yeah, I remember that thing that you said about your uncle's funeral. Or I remember that thing that you said about your first LinkedIn local. I remember that first video that you did with the crumbs on your dress and it was 2:30 in the morning. Or I don't remember what it was, but you pulled it out of nowhere. I was like, unbelievably like stunned. And for me, speechless is a big deal.
Yeah.
My whole thing is communication and messaging. So if I'm left without words, you have to know you have this ability to connect by listening and taking in, absorbing things and storing them. And then you can kind of pick them out at times when it helps you to relate. So there are strengths, that are natural. Like it could be learner, it could be input, it could be communication, it could be relator. I would love to do a UMAP for you, your strengths, your values, your skills, your personality driven interests, and just see what makes you up. But I already know from observation what I see. I think you're a superhero.
Well, I appreciate that, and like I said, it's funny that you bring that up because I just thought about it literally last night,
Hmm.
and it just I started questioning myself while I was at work because I was just like, I know I've always had a pretty good memory, but it's just weird to me what I guess stays and what doesn't. But again, that's another
What do
getting
you
into
notice?
neuroscience, and well, like I said, it's weird to me that I can sometimes not remember something that I need to do, whether
Hmm.
it's a chore or a task or whatever, but then I can pull back from being 20 episodes in. I can pull back from episode. I just did the show notes for episode 5 Monday night because the episode was releasing on Tuesday, and episode 5 happened I think the end of September, early October. um I'm going to say closer to the end of September, but either way, you're talking almost 3 4 weeks ago. And again, I've done so many others since then, so it just seems weird. It just seemed weird to me, like what sticks and what doesn't, I guess, is the
Yeah,
way.
well, if you're saying that like there's a pattern of these tasks or things you have to do being something that you forget, there are executing themed strengths, which for me are my bottom 10 or a lot of like thinking and executing strengths. People who are very high or who have a very high up strength of achiever or of responsibility. Like they don't forget to do things that they say they're going to do. But that's one kind of memory. That's where they are naturally strong. You're strong in, I think, thinking through things. I think you have some like intellection and input and learner, possibly like some learning themed strengths, and then relating themes. So relating themes, which are what they sound like. When I create a connection with a person, much more likely to remember something about that touched my heart than something that I have to do. And that's just how you're made up.
Hmm. Interesting. This is. I feel like we're getting into like neuroscience or something here, but
Totally.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's interesting to think about. So the next question, I've had an interesting time trying to formulate it because for the first bunch of episodes, I just went off with the question, and then I got to this about 2 3 episodes ago where I asked this question of how many times would you say you faced vulnerability, or like how many times have you been in a vulnerable situation, or something of that sort. And the one of the past guests said to me, compared to who? And I was like, oh. I was like, that just sort of,
Well,
made me rethink about it, right? So the way I'm
yeah.
trying to form it now is that, I want to sort of put it as, you emotionally, how many times would you say, emotionally you felt vulnerable, in the sense that like how, like, would you say that there's been a lot of it in your life? Would you say that you've been affected by it not so much? Like just that sort of idea. And then if there's any other stories that you could share to give us an idea of other times in your life where you've felt at that point.
Yeah. I can talk about that for sure. For me, it's daily. I'm a very emotional person. I'm very open, but only so much. I only share so much so that I still stay in control. I share enough for people to connect with me. I entrust them with things that other people would consider way far out of their comfort zone. So it is vulnerable anytime I feel the stretch for myself. I think that that's where the line of vulnerability is. I'm very comfortable sharing a lot of stuff that other people might not be comfortable sharing, but that's not vulnerability. Everybody has a different ability, a different level of what they are and aren't willing to share, what's private to them, what's personal, and what can be public or at least shared with one other person. I think I put myself on purpose in situations where I can test that line for myself and push it a little bit more. I'm most vulnerable when I'm in love because I have high expectations of the person that I'm with to receive and appreciate me for who I am in all of my, warts and flaws. And I'm also most vulnerable as an entrepreneur because this is my livelihood, this is my way of making money, and it's my legacy now. Like, what I'm focused on with Say Things Better is changing the way everybody in the world communicates to a way that's more connective. And that to me is, it's so important that if I fail, I feel like I have nothing. And it's not true, I know that, but the feeling is there. So anytime I try a new workshop out or test something that hasn't been proven yet, I'm putting that reputation on the line, and I feel this pressure, this anxiety all the time about, what if this is the thing that stops me from being able to do this full time? What if I stop being interested in it? What if other people stop believing in me? What if somebody new comes along and has something else that's different that people like more than they like what I have? And so all of that, these are vulnerable things to even talk about, because I feel the discomfort, and you're on video with me, so you can see my face, you can see me pulling it out of myself to share with you. And my decision is to entrust,
Mm-hmm.
to entrust you with that, to entrust your listeners and viewers with what it's really like for me. I had, to share a story, I had a client that I did, a very big pharmaceutical client, and I did a workshop for them as a pilot for a program that they want to develop. And I got some feedback from it, and a lot of people were writing and saying how valuable it was to them, and people on the follow-up calls saying, here's what I've learned, here's how I've implemented it, and it felt great. And then they reached out to me to invite me back to, or at least to, put a bid in, send a proposal for being at this meeting that they had coming up on October 23rd, which is, it was like 3 weeks or 2.5 weeks from the time that I got the call saying, actually, thank you so much for your proposal, but we're going to go with somebody else. We think, the pricing seems really high for this. And also we're going to try out another person's pilot program, because this gives us an opportunity to see what will be a better fit for us, which to them probably just was a matter of business and a matter of, let's see what else there is, and let's look at our budget, and not personal at all. Like, after all, they had reached out to me
Yeah.
to ask me to submit a proposal. But it felt to me like a total rejection of my fit in their industry. And I felt I made this so big in my head that I felt like I should do completely different programming. What I have no place here, the negative self-talk started, and I was so vulnerable, but without a communication partner to work off of. It was just me talking myself down, talking myself down, talking myself down. I was, vulnerable to myself and this negativity, these arrows that I was shooting into my own heart for no reason. I have one friend that I went to about this, who had helped me with some previous proposals and who knew the industry really well, and who I had talked to about how my program had gone before. And she told me, like, kind of calmed me down and talked me off a ledge. She's like, that's okay. You can just get feedback, for next time. You could reach out. And I'm like, okay, how frequently do I wait? Do I do it now? Do I like, she's like, listen, you don't want to come across as desperate in your communication. You want to have something to say to them. Keep it short and simple. And so I felt, even sending an email that said, thank you so much, I'd love a debrief session. Best of luck at the meeting. Even sending that email, I couldn't trust myself to write the right thing. And I felt so vulnerable hitting send. Is this the right thing? Am I further ruining our relationship? I mean, it was so big in my head. And then the next morning I was like, okay, well, I need to make up for, several $1,000s worth of work that I was kind of counting on for this month. And I got into strategic action mode, what do I do now? What's the next thing? Who do I reach out to first? Who's the easiest? Like, yes, I can do a project with you. Here's some money, clients that I can reach out to. And I put myself forward into action, and left it behind me. But that night, it was such a low point on my entrepreneurial roller coaster because I put so much weight onto it. And I know not to do that. I know not to like count my chickens before they hatch or put all my eggs in one basket, but I'm still learning how to be a business person. I know how to do what I do. I know how to help people communicate in a way that gets them results. But to actually run a business, treat myself with some kindness, and open up to people who have been there and can help me, that vulnerability is one of the things that keeps me going. Because without it, without talking to that friend, I probably would have talked myself into quitting or something eventually, or at least quitting that part of the business. That's how emotional and vulnerable I am. That's how tied to my feelings about things I really am. I need those other communication partners around me to say, no, you've got this, get back in there. I really need that. So being vulnerable, it's hard for me, to really open up about things that I would rather control, but it's necessary.
It's funny. So like as you ended that there, it sort of seems like, you're past you, that person that needs to be in control and everything seems to creep back at these times. But then
Yeah.
because you have the people around you, like you're saying, and I know how important it is to have the right people around you. I mean, talk about negative self-talk. The reason I disappeared from LinkedIn for pretty much a year was a lot of negative self-talk. There was other things going on in my life that I needed to work on, but there was a lot of negative self-talk. Even starting this podcast, I kept telling myself, oh, I need to learn the format of a podcast. I need to do this. I need to do that. And it was just like, whether it was negative self-talk or talking your way out of it, pretty much
Mhm.
the same thing. I was doing that constantly. And then, it was friends and my wife mainly who basically said to me, like, just do it. Like, just start. Like, who cares? Like, you'll figure it out as you go along. And I was like,
Yeah.
here's the guy who was telling everybody last year, just start, whatever it is, just start. And then I couldn't even do it myself. And then I went out, I bought all the equipment, and I, reached out to a bunch of people. I got the first person on, and I was like, all right, this isn't so bad. And she's right. I learned as I went along. I learned how to use GarageBand. I learned how to create my graphics. Whatever it was, I figured it out as I needed to. And even, down to releasing it, I put out a post on all of the platforms saying October 1st, releasing the Vulnerable podcast. And then I realized that you need to get approved by a lot of the platforms. And I was like, uh-oh. And so already I started to panic, and then I put it out and I ended up getting approved a lot quicker than I thought I would. And so I can see
Probably
exactly.
because you did that. you know?
Well, yeah, but it's funny how like you can talk yourself out of these things, or you can get into these situations, and then it's almost like I don't know who said it. I'm sure many people have, but we always think of like the worst case scenario, but that's actually not the worst case scenario. Like, if
Right.
that makes
Something
sense.
else can go wrong or
Exactly.
wronger. For
Exactly. I was
sure.
just saying that to somebody
Yeah.
the other day. I'm like, if you think that's the worst case scenario, think about what the next worst. And this is something I heard in a podcast. It was like, think about the next worst case scenario, and then after you've come up with that one, think about the next one, and eventually you'll get to something so ridiculous that you realize the first one didn't even matter anymore, and you're sort of over it. So it's just,
That's really helpful. I'm going to try that. Like,
I don't know.
I'm
I
going to
heard it.
imagine, like, what if I didn't get this contract and I had Ebola or something,
Yeah, well, that's what I mean, right? And as you keep going down the list, you realize
and my
again
whole
where your
family
brain,
died,
yeah, you
right?
realize your brain can take you into like some crazy places. And I mean, for
Yeah.
me, at
Yeah,
least, in the
for
last little
sure.
while, meditation has helped huge. I've been doing that daily, pretty much for 10 minutes a day, and it's helped me control a lot of my thoughts and a lot of my emotions over the last little while. So, but that's another topic for another podcast for another
Yeah. Well, I want to listen to that one too. I
day.
use, I mean, I make sure that I have the people around me. I think being vulnerable also provides accountability.
Mhm.
So, like, look, when you said this is happening October 1st, then you had sort of a responsibility to make sure that happened.
Yeah,
When you schedule your first podcast guests, even if they're a month out, you have to have what you need by then.
yeah.
So it kind of pushes you into the taking action when you have other people involved to be accountable to. That's where entrepreneurial life is hard, because you're often in it for yourself, you know, or
Hmm.
if it's, you know, leading a podcast, like that to me is entrepreneurial because it is an enterprise, you know, it is something that you undertake, that's you, it has an objective, you have production, you have needs, you have overhead, you have
Yeah.
cost, you have demand, you know, it's everything, it's the same. And when you think about why you're able to get it done, that accountability is huge. Getting the right people on with you too, who, look, if the sound goes out for the whole recording, are not going to be that jerk who makes you feel bad about it. They'll
Yeah.
just say, okay, let's reschedule, I'd love to talk to you again.
Yeah.
And that's part of it for me too, making sure I have those people around me. I take CBD oil from Holistic Hemp Company also, that helps with anxiety. And that's the other thing, is that that control, that need to control something to the detail, it produces anxiety around things that don't make sense to have anxiety about. But that's why it's anxiety, right? It's not like anybody else cares about this stuff. But if you have attached so much to the control of it, like I do with lighting, or like, for example, right now, look, I don't even know if you're using this video or certainly the whole thing, but you may.
Yeah.
And I have this light that's creating this shadow behind my head when I move, and I'm so conscious of it that I'm like, what can I do to get that shadow to go away? And I guarantee you hadn't noticed it or thought about it until I just mentioned it. But for
Pretty
me,
much.
it's something that I'm obsessively anxious about.
No, and I think we all have our things, right? I mean, the thing
Yeah.
for me is that I've led my life up until this point, and obviously, stress is something that we all have, and it's going to happen. And I, used to tell everybody I'd never stress, which is absolute crap because we all do. But I've always tried to lead a life of as little stress as possible. So I think that's how I've been able to avoid anxiety for the most part, because I just try and avoid it. Just because from a young age, I don't know how I figured it out, but I realized like all the things that it can lead to in terms of like just health issues and so on. So I just sort of decided, okay, I'm going to leave this over here. And again, it comes up, but I try and control it as much as possible, and it helps me at least. But I've been around people who have higher levels of anxiety, and I can see how the smallest little thing, and it's also that sort of spiraling thing where you look at this small thing and then it turns into a bigger thing, and then it sort of keeps rolling, and
Yeah.
it's a snowball of anxiety because and then what I'll try and do if I can help that person is say, okay, let's go back to the original point and let's think about how realistic that is, or do you have enough information to really come to that conclusion, or whatever the case might be. But yeah, so but it's I think something that a lot of us struggle with. Anxiety is something that I constantly hear people talking about, which is good too, because I think the more that we talk about it, the more we can come to solutions for it rather than just living in it ourselves.
Yeah.
So everything that you've been through, and what you're talking about now, even you mentioned it, or maybe you didn't mention it on the interview, but before it, you sort of uprooted your life to a different part of the states last year. All these different things that you've done, how would you say it's helped you get to where you're at right now in your life? Like whether it's this courses, the move, whatever it is, how would you say all of it's helped you get to where you are?
I needed the people. I needed the people around me, whether that was my decision to go onto LinkedIn and engage in it as a community. My decision was, it came from a feeling of not having that anymore. You know, having left the acting community for the most part, I missed having people around me to cheer me on and to see things in me and appreciate things about me. And I was at a time in my life when I wasn't feeling appreciated at work, at home, you know, and I wasn't feeling like I was being utilized. Like there was so much good stuff about me that was going to waste. And going on LinkedIn, I got so much validation from other people who noticed things about me, like I communicate well, or I'm able to say things in a way that is simple and compelling and help them to articulate their ideas. And people kept asking me for help, and I kept giving it to them while I had this full-time job. I didn't need anything from anybody. I wasn't like trying to build a business. It was just, oh, here's something I can help with. Absolutely. And I didn't see it as providing value that anyone would pay for until people kept trying to offer to pay me for it. So that feedback was really eye-opening to me. And I was like, well, what else can I notice about these people and about myself with them? I noticed that a lot of the people that I was clicking with happened to be part of this entrepreneurial community who were in Dallas or Dallas Fort Worth area on the LinkedIn profiles that I was seeing. If I would click with someone, I mean, there was a good contingency like yourself up in Toronto, or in that area, or somewhere in Canada. There were people in Australia I was really connecting with, people in the UK. But within the United States, there were so many people that were part of this Dallas contingency. And LinkedIn Local, which were these events that people were hosting or continue to all over to try and take that connection from online offline and get face to face with the people that we know only through profiles and interactions, and meet them like this, where you can have real conversations that connect. And I started traveling around to LinkedIn locals all over the place. And I was asked to speak at some that were here in Dallas, where I am right now. And when I came here to the city and I met these people in person, I felt like they might be right, that I was unstoppable. But I needed a whole group of people to think that and to say that to me, for me to even think, oh, is this a thing? Am I potentially unstoppable? Could I be a person who changes the world, and how do I want to do that? And when I was getting this feedback from people, and I needed what they had to offer, and I was so excited about what they brought to the world, I felt way more at home than I had been feeling in New York City, where I was born and raised,
Hmm.
where the theater community is everywhere, or where I looked around and saw memories everywhere of past relationships, or things that had fallen apart. And I felt like it was a fresh start with people I believed in, who believed in me too. Without that, I don't think it would have been possible for me to even take the first step, let alone launch like a rocket. What's happened since. It's all been very successful very quickly, but without hearing other people build this room around me where I was safe to explore, shatter walls, go high up into the sky and come back down into a soft place, I don't think I would have even taken that first step.
Hmm. Yeah, I mentioned this. I think it was, and the reason it's probably coming to mind is because I think it was on the episode that I released yesterday, is about finding your tribe. Because the
Yeah.
gentleman that I was speaking to on that episode, I said to him, it sounds like he found his tribe once he got to a certain point in his life, and he realized what he needed. He found those people that could basically help him get to the next step, and it sounds to me like that's sort of what you found as well.
Yeah, it's
So
everything.
would you say at this point in your life career, overall, would you say that you found success and fulfillment, or would you say that you're still on your journey towards it?
Oh, I found it. I mean, I found it. I know what it feels like. When I feel that I'm winning, I feel like I'm in alignment, my strengths, my values, the things that I like doing that I'm good at, just what I'm naturally interested in, what I'm curious about, and how I feel most alive. I know what that feels like now. And so I don't think that like full success is that I always feel like that every moment of every day, but just having the awareness at least is a success in and of itself. I know it feels like home to me. I know it feels like magic to me. And I know what I feel capable of achieving. And even knowing what that feels like, I understand that success is going to be that plus one, plus one, plus one until I have these new definitions of what that feels like. But I know the joy, I know the fulfillment now.
Interesting. That's one of the most interesting ways I've heard it so far. Because most people just say I'm still on my journey towards it, or that they don't have a definition for success. But I like how you put it, where like you know what it feels like, you know sort of what success is to you, which is important
Mhm.
because I think a lot of us, unfortunately, we look at success compared to other people. Like
Right.
I don't have the bigger house or the nicer car or the this or
Hmm.
the that, but for you, you figured out what success meant to you, you felt it, so you know exactly what it feels like and when it feels that way. And then fulfillment, I mean, that's another thing altogether, but I couldn't agree more that that feeling of joy is probably the best way to sort of feel or know that you're fulfilled, is just to feel joy as much as possible. And I've found that in my own life as well, so I can relate with you there. So down to the last couple questions. Well, one's a question, one's not so much a question. But so this last question is for people to sort of get something out of the episode at the end. Obviously, if they went back and they listened through the whole thing, there's a lot of takeaways that they can use for their own life, things that they can maybe techniques that they can try. But what I would like from you now is if you can give 3 key takeaways from your journey, from your experience that people could implement into their life right after they finish listening to this episode, the next day, whenever it might be. So what would you say your 3 key takeaways are?
You have to know yourself. You have to know who's speaking when you talk, what's important to you, and what you want to do to other people when you communicate with them. So knowing yourself is number 1. Trusting other people is number 2, to entrust. Make that decision to be vulnerable, to be open to the people who can help you when you don't feel you are able to be helped. When you can't see the possibility, you have to trust other people that maybe they will. And finally, just communicating with intention, deciding, I decide I want to affirm, to connect, and to empower the people that I talk to, the people I communicate with, even if it's over text. Decide what you want to do to other people. Choose some verbs that describe that kinetic action that communication will take from you to them.
That last one for me, I think, stands out the most because I've had to realize that a lot recently, working in a different industry than I've ever worked in. I mean, sales is communication like 101 because you have to communicate to sell. But in this other industry and working in a factory, manual labor, it's all guys pretty much. It's been a completely different learning experience for me. And communication has been one of the biggest lessons for me. Even in my marriage, communication has really come into play and realizing the importance of it, because in the past it was mostly through text and email and stuff, and now I've realized how important it is to communicate like in person, face to face, and do it well. So definitely that last one, like I said, is very apparent to me right now in my life. So the last thing, like I said, not so much of a question, but what I want to do is give everybody who comes on an opportunity to sort of promote themselves, talk about anything they've got going on, programs, classes, whatever it might be. And then as well, sort of where people can find them through social or however they want to communicate with people. So the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Okay, well, come and find me on LinkedIn. It's Lila Smith, Lila. You can also look up Say Things Better, which is the name of my company and the name of my method of intentional communication. You can also find me on LinkedIn, my company page, Say Things Better. And you can find me on Instagram at Say Things Better and at Lila Lasagna, LILALASAGNA. And if I'm promoting something, I have a mastermind that's coming up in November. It's a smaller one than I usually do, just because of bandwidth and because I want to try something out myself and see what it's like if I cap it at 15 instead of at 25. And these groups always sell out. Anna McAfee, she's been in one of my groups before and has watched my videos and engaged with people in the group. It's not really an open invitation to everybody, although if something that I've said has resonated with you, write and tell me why. Tell me what it was that really struck a nerve with you and where you feel you need to grow. And I'll see if I have something for you. But I do want to issue a personal invitation to you to apply, Brian. If you feel like having a 1-month course on intentional communication would benefit you or help you to get clear in your messaging, or whatever you need a yes on in your life, or how to show up more intentionally in your communication in your marriage or on your podcast or anything like that, then I think it would be a good fit for you. So, since we're on the phone and we're talking, I'm in the position where I get to invite people personally who I want to work with. So yes, it's open for people to reach out. If you look up hashtag Say Things Better Mastermind on LinkedIn, you'll get some more information. You can also look up hashtag Say Things Better Alumni and see some of the people who've come through the program. But it's a 4-week course, and it's something that I run for people who feel that they have something that they want to say, a position that they take, and they want to make sure that other people recognize them for that, and that they're able to scale out those efforts to have an impact. So I help people with their communication around that using my Say Things Better Mastermind. So be a different kind of group in January, but this is the one that I think you should do. And if anybody is at a company who's listening then know that I do communication mapping workshops, verb your values workshops, and say things better workshops to help the people in your company connect and connect your message out to your audience. That's really it.
Awesome. Well, I hope that somebody listening will definitely reach out. I mean, I will definitely have a conversation with you after this, because I am at a point right now where I've got, I think, my story where I want to go with things, but I haven't definitely figured out the right way to do it yet. Just sort of been putting feelers out there, but we'll definitely discuss that outside of here. But yeah, again, if anybody is listening that feels like Lila can help them, definitely reach out to her. I mean, I've had a great time getting to know her today on this episode and over the last couple of years. And she's good people. I can definitely say that much. And she knows what she's doing. So sorry. So again, thank you again for coming on. Thank you for sharing so openly. I can definitely see, like you said, obviously not everybody can see us because then not everybody's going to see the video, but I could definitely see the emotion that you were, sort of pulling out and also holding back a bit, I feel. So I can definitely see that this wasn't, you just making up a story. This was you being open and honest. And I appreciate that a lot. So thank you again for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Vulnerable Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. It helps get the word out and means more than you know. You can also follow the podcast on Instagram at vulnerable.podcast or on Facebook and LinkedIn by searching Vulnerable Podcast. You can also follow me on Instagram at the BE Almeida. That's the BEALMEIDA, or by searching my name on Facebook and LinkedIn. If you know anyone with a great story of going from struggle to success, please let me know, as I would love to interview them for the show. I appreciate you taking the time to listen, and see you next week.